talk leader for New York and the world. An American original. Talk Radio 77 WABC and WABCRadio.com.
This is Rita Cosby, and I'm speaking with Martin Kostuik, the CEO of Battery Mineral Resources, a company often referred to as BMR. Martin, welcome. Can you please introduce Battery Mineral Resources to our listeners and speak about your entire portfolio of assets, cobalt, graphite, and lithium?
Rita, thank you very much for having me on your program. I'm looking forward to sharing the story of Battery Minerals with you and your listeners. Just to start, BMR is a development style company in the junior mining space, and it has the goal of becoming a premier supplier of those items that you listed, cobalt, lithium, graphite, but also copper. These are all important minerals to the global electrification marketplace. So we intend really to bring value to our shareholders by transforming the company from a development style company, which is what it is right now, into a cash flowing producer of those critical battery minerals. And our portfolio varies in terms of the stages of development that we have, including a longer term lithium project in Nevada, a cobalt project in northern Ontario, a different cobalt project in northern Idaho. We have graphite in South Korea. And we have a near-term copper project in Chile, which was recently in production.
How are the materials you are mining used in electric vehicles?
The materials that we are mining, namely lithium, graphite, and cobalt, are all used in the manufacturing of electric vehicle batteries. And interestingly enough, really none of those materials are used in a standard internal combustion vehicle. So the market that's being generated by this rise in popularity of electric vehicles is really a compelling story for us. But I will say that copper, though, is different. Copper is used in both types of vehicles, whether it's electric or internal combustion. But it's important to note that the amount of copper that's used in an electric vehicle is up to 3 to 3.5 times greater than it would be in a standard vehicle.
Martin, please comment on BMR's main focus property in Chile and its prior history of copper production.
BMR's nearest term project is this recently producing copper mine in Chile, and it's called Punataki. Now, Punataki has a 10-year history of continuous operations, which started around in 2010, and the mine produced between 20 and 25 million pounds of copper per year. And because of its recently producing status, this project requires relatively small amounts of capital to resume operations when compared to a brand new mine that's just beginning.
When you acquired the asset, what was the rationale behind purchasing it?
The rationale that we had behind purchasing the asset was that it was a very good opportunity for BMR to transform itself from being a developer and going into a cash flowing type of situation. We believe that entering into cash flowing is essentially the strongest pathway to create value for our shareholders. Then, once we're into cash flowing, we use this newly created value as a platform to scale the company. And that's really the rationale.
What's your general outlook on mining overall, especially in Chile?
My view of the industry as it stands right now is that it is really, truly on the cusp of a very great surge in demand from nearly all the commodities in the mining space. And also because of low valuations that companies are seeing these days, this is really beginning to attract the attention of the generalist investor. And that's something that the generalist investor really typically doesn't pay a lot of attention to the mining industry. So you combine all these things together, and this should be very beneficial to the mining business. Now, Chile in particular, it's really poised to gain from this same dynamic. And Chile, remains as one of the premier mining countries. It's important to understand that for copper in particular, Chile is the world's largest producer, and it's very important to their country because mining contributes 15% of the GDP and half of its export value.
Martin, please address the recent constitution vote in Chile.
Chile recently voted to decide whether to accept a newly proposed constitution. The constitution was drafted by the new incoming government, and it presented articles that, for example, could nationalize portions of the mining industry. It would affect the amount of protected lands in the country and also diminish private water rights. These are a few of the things that were introduced in the new constitution. It was recently, though, rejected in an overwhelming vote to say no.
What environmental scrutiny faces mining companies? Does BMR have its necessary permits?
Chile has a very mature mining industry, and that involves regulations aimed at minimizing the environmental impact of mining operations, as you would expect, being a mature mining country. Areas of focus include wildlife, vegetation, and water, to name a few. Now, BMR currently has the permits necessary to resume operations, and it's currently working with the regulators in the country to obtain necessary permits for the medium to long term, including a permit to allow us to employ new technology which uses less water in our operations.
Martin, what is your outlook on the copper market for the coming year, and how is BMR navigating through that outlook?
Recent sentiment for the copper market is very positive for the demand-supply dynamic and should spell higher prices in the short term. This sentiment has looked back as to what happened in the market in 2022 and pointed to the idea that copper demand picture for 2023 is even stronger than what was predicted a year ago. That's really how they looked at things. This information is coupled with a downgraded expected supply picture. So with worldwide copper stocks at 14-year lows, we feel very confident that resuming operations at Punitaki early next year is perfect timing with the market.
Please address the critical demand for copper and supply shortages and the electrification and renewable energy revolution.
Copper and iron ore are some of the best indicators of world economic activity. Iron ore, of course, goes into steel, which is used to build infrastructure, and copper goes into anything electrical. There's a current and forecasted gap between demand and supply for copper that is highly unlikely to be filled. On the demand side, the biggest driver is from renewable energy and electric vehicles, which we all understand because we can see it all around us. On the supply side, it's a little less obvious, but mining is a very capital-intensive industry, and projects can take 10 plus years to be brought into production. So having said that, there has been a period over the last 10 years where capital spent on new projects has been less than half of where it should be in order to stay current with demand. So it will take a long while to right the ship, so to say, and pricing should be in our favor.
Martin, how does BMR compare to its competitors?
BMR has the opportunity to enter into positive cash flowing in the near term, and we believe we have the ability to scale the company relatively quickly because of all the opportunities we see, especially in Chile. We also have very supportive owners. You combine those two together, and I think that puts us separate from our competitors.
Do you foresee management changes or additions to your board of directors?
Regarding management and board, I feel like we are right size for where we are, and we have a good complement of differing expertise. I think we're in good shape.
In August, you announced a resource estimate. Can you explain to the listeners the significance of the data and the confidence it has given BMR to work towards getting into production?
Regarding the resource estimate, we had a very successful exploration drilling program last year, which allowed us to present to investors enough resources that could translate into about 6 years of mine life. The work on the mine life is being finished right now, and that remains to be seen, but we're very confident and that we'll be able to translate that amount of mine life from the resources. And this is very significant because it would give us the initial nest egg of operating years that one would want to see when they're investing into a restarting an operation, with the idea, of course, that as we continue into operations, we would continue our exploration and continue to add more to the mine life as we go.
Please speak about BMR's approach going from exploration into a cash-flowing company and why that is the best option for BMR.
Our approach is to bring value to the company by becoming a premier supplier of battery minerals to the electrification marketplace. There are other ways to bring value. For example, as an exploration company, their model is something like this. They would typically drill, then raise money in the equity markets, then drill some more, raise money, and repeat until eventually, or not eventually, they would get to a stage where they can monetize the project by either selling it or funding it in production. We, on the other hand, our view and the view of our major shareholders is that our model of acquiring undervalued assets, which are near-term producing assets, then proceeding through and de-risking them and funding them into cash flowing is a much better way to get a higher valuation and also in a shorter amount of time for our shareholders.
Are you looking for other project opportunities as well? If so, what type of projects are you looking for, and what is the criteria?
BMR is currently evaluating several other project opportunities in both North and South America, and particularly in Chile. These are mostly all projects that are within 1 to 2 years of being able to be put into production and cash flowing. But also, some of them are actually currently producing as well. This is really the criteria because we believe that cash is king and the current market environment is a good time to buy.
Can you give us an idea of BMR's timeline going forward and what milestones are ahead?
BMR is looking to acquire the remainder of the funding to put Punitaki into production by the end of Q1 of 2023. Once the funding is in hand, we then start allocating capital, which will enable us to begin copper production about 4 months after that, and moving from there, achieve full production of 20 to 25 million pounds of copper per year about 6 months after that. Along the way, though, we utilize cash being generated to appropriately resume developing our other projects while engaging in the many near-term cash flowing opportunities that we spoke about, in particular in Chile. So 2023 will be a very busy and exciting year for BMR shareholders.
Martin Kostuik, the CEO of Battery Mineral Resources, BMR. Martin, thank you for joining us.
Battery Mineral Resources, U.S. trading symbol BTRMF, and in Canada, BMR. Web address bmrcorp.com. The preceding may contain forward-looking statements which may not be realized.
The number one talk station in the nation, 77 WABC, New York.